Welcome to What We Watch. I'm Dan.
I'm Olga, and you're listening to DoingOK's Entertainment Podcast.
Each week we discuss 3 topics which vary from movie and TV reviews to trailer breakdowns and pop culture news. Each 10-minute topic is broken out into its own little video over on youtube.com/DoingOK throughout the week. Then, in theory, the whole thing is put up on Fridays as an audio podcast. All that said, let's begin with today's topic. We're talking about Prodigal Son, Fox's new show. It's a procedural cop, father and son murder spree drama.
Murder spree drama. I would say it's a serial killer thriller.
Serial killer thriller. I like it.
But it's, not... It's still, like you said, it's a procedural. It's got your cops and bad guys kind of format. It's not really reinventing the wheel, but...
Yeah, so the basic premise here is that the main character, his father was the surgeon, a devious serial killer who was caught and is in jail. And so, together with his father, they will solve crimes because his father knows the criminal mind and... blah, blah, blah. I mean, that's the super stripped down version of the premise.
It is. I mean, what you're missing out is the whole idea of the prodigal son of this, the serial killer's son, who is our lead main character, feeling and being afraid of what he might turn into and following in his father's footsteps, but instead using that to help catch the bad guys instead of be the bad guy.
Yeah.
As a profiler.
It's a profiler.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen a television show with a profiler who's quirky before? Never happened.
Never happened. Like
Never.
I said, the show does not reinvent the wheel.
What did you think of the pilot?
So I'll say this. I've been anticipating the show for like a few months.
Wow.
I've been excited for it,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. I'm a big fan of Michael Sheen, who plays the dad. So I would say my expectations were like high. I was hopeful.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to temper them because I was like, this is another Fox procedural. Don't get too excited.
Yeah.
And I feel like it was in that nice middle ground where I was like pleased with what it was.
How did it compare to like Lucifer to you?
Oh,
I mean, it's also early Lucifer.
Early Lucifer. I feel like they're kind of different because like the character is more fun and charming in Lucifer, whereas like what was his name? Malcolm?
We'll call him Bright.
Bright. He goes by Bright. Which is kind of dumb, but it's supposed to be dumb. And they make fun of him for having his last name be Bright because it's a pseudonym or whatever. Anyway, so I will say that he's like less charming than some of the other Fox leads.
Yeah.
I think he's almost more comparable to like House.
Yeah. Well, so, I mean, my main takeaway is like, it was enjoyable. I think that, and, I think that something we've hinted at but haven't really said straight out is that it's trying to be tongue-in-cheek, that it's like there's comedic, like important comedic moments. There's quirkiness that's like more than just like, oh, he's odd. Like there's like, he's like really odd.
He's like tortured.
Yeah. Well, I mean, tortured is what the normal. I mean, like he's
I guess
like,
you're right.
He's like, rah! Like he's hammily, cheesily, purposefully cheesily over the top at times.
Yeah.
And not just him. Like there are just like moments in dialogue where they're clearly going for comedy.
Right.
They're sort of playing with the trope. Of the dark mindhunter, whatever sort of, profiler who has is he going to be, is he as bad as the serial killers that he's hunting?
Right.
Will he become them? My problem, honestly, is that I think they should have leaned further into that. I was getting pretty bored until like the halfway mark where they have that scene. I'm not going to say the specifics, but the scene with the axe, where he goes like wheelie loopy, and that was awesome
because it was like the biggest hint of character outside of the box that I feel like we got.
I feel like it had too much of a foot still in just doing what it's lampooning and not enough of a foot in lampooning. Like,
well, what do you feel like it was lampooning?
Well, like, I guess I don't know if lampooning is the right. It's hard to know what they want for the tone of the show, right? Because I think they want it to work as a general procedural, like, oh, who are the 2 weird people we can put together to solve murders. Oh, the murderer and his son. They're working like it's like, you know, like they wanted to work on that level. They want him to be dramatic and have like this dark history and have it be a dark show, but then they also want to play with it. And so they're trying to do a lot of things. And to me, it's like it feels like Baby's first Hannibal episode.
I was a little surprised that you were like, how does this compare to Lucifer? When I was expecting you to say, how does this compare to Hannibal?
I mean, I was bringing up Lucifer because I think that in some ways...
the tone is allegedly more similar.
Yeah, it's trying to be a fun Fox procedural.
Right.
And so, like...
along the lines of, like, Bones.
Yeah. But, I mean, it's definitely evocative of Hannibal, but Hannibal is leaps and bounds better than it.
Yeah.
At the same time, that's what I'm talking about. It's like, at the same time, it's going for a more pulpy, silly, like fun take, right? But I don't think that it's hitting on that quite enough. I still say it's like 70% just a bad version of Hannibal and 30% making fun and like having fun. And instead of 50-50 or 60, you know.
I agree with you. But the thing is what you're saying of like being a fun version, I think it's what it's trying to be and what I consider kind of like Fox to be is it's like at its core kind of inoffensive. It is like Hannibal took very big risks in style and mood, and it scared the general viewer. It did not do well.
Yeah.
It was on the struggle bus in terms of an audience from season 1 through its cancellation. Yeah. Like it was not
it's not an easily palatable multi, you know.
Well, again, we'll get the whole multi-season thing.
No pun intended is what I meant.
Yeah, good one. But what I'm trying to say is I think what they're trying to do here is be like, this may be another like crime drama and another serial killer show, but we're setting ourselves apart with some of the characters. But don't worry, it won't be like too stylized. It's just, I think it's just meant to draw in a wider audience.
Yeah, so which is why I'm like, it's Baby's first Hannibal episode. Right. It's like it's really watered down Hannibal. Yeah, I mean, if that's what you want, if you want Hannibal, but Hannibal was a little too much for you, this show will satisfy, right? It's a more comfortable viewing experience while still being, you know, sort of dark and sort of twisted and still having that, like, brooding, you know, he's hurt.
Brooding protagonist.
Like, protagonist, right? You know, so, like, it's you know.
the likable serial killer.
Yeah, I think there's fun to be had here. I just don't think there's, like, necessarily high quality to be had here in the long term, but maybe I'm wrong.
So the only thing that, like, obviously this is a pilot review, right? And the whole question that we're trying to answer is it worth your time? Yeah. Pilots are notoriously difficult to get a feel for the rest of the season. Yeah. Like, there are great shows that have terrible pilots. Yeah. And there are, like, bad shows that have pretty good ones. Like, it all depends. And there are shows where I'm like, I'm so on board, and then I never finish the season. Yeah. I feel like this show, to me, is on the trajectory of your typical starts off a little rough, a lot of exposition, a lot of what are these relationships? Why should you care? And that means that the rest of the season can kind of like take off because that's already set up.
I guess the thing is that it's like, I actually, like, generally they do handle the exposition like okay, right? And they are doing stuff that's a little bit more stylized than just your totally normal network procedural. And I think that most of the characters are likable. No one's acting stood out to me as like terrible or anything. Right. None of the dialogue was like, well, I mean, that it's trying to be hammy at times, so it's hard to tell.
Well, but like, some of it was a little, in my opinion, clumsy with exposition.
Yeah. But I think it's a fine network pilot. I just think that maybe it's been a while since I've watched the network pilot. And so, like, it just felt very indicative of network television. And we're going to have 22 episodes, and we're going to make you think things are consequential, but they're probably not going to be all that.
I don't know if it has 22 episodes.
That's a good question. I
feel like that's not really typical anymore.
Yeah.
Then again, I'm pretty sure Lucifer season 1 did have 22 episodes, but that was years ago.
Yeah. I mean, it just felt very pedestrian, aside from the stuff that I felt like they should have pushed farther into. Because it's like, I mean, we just recently watched the American Horror Story 1984 premiere, and that was another one where I was like, okay, like, we've seen slasher stuff before. Your American Horror Story pump it up to 11. And I didn't feel like they did that there either. And I think that they should be doing that here, where it's like, yeah, we've seen Hannibal do it. If you don't do it worse, do it different. And I feel like they could have done it more different and been able to pull me in more that way.
I still feel like the promise, so to speak, of Hannibal is on the table. I mean, less so, because the visions, I really don't know much about the showrunner of Prodigal Son.
It is a Berlanti production. He owns like all of television.
He does. All hail Greg Berlanti. We do not offend here. But it's just one of those shows that to me is like making things more. I don't think that the word approachable is a bad thing. As someone who loves stylized genre things and enjoyed Hannibal and enjoys like Mr. Robot and whatever. I like those things, but they take a lot out of you to watch. They require like this focus that sometimes you don't want in the middle of the week. Yeah. And I will like completely admit to sitting there and like eating up Lucifer and Grey's Anatomy and things like that. But I guess
that's the thing is where I'm like, I actually understand that stuff in some ways more than this. I would understand in some ways Bones or whatever, House, whatever, as being like, oh, this has mass appeal. This is more palatable. This is fun and easy and in and out. Even like Law and Order or whatever. Whereas this, I feel like it just stuck between two worlds of like, are you a serious show or are you just a fun show? Like, I'm not really sure. I guess feel like the tone is a little bit in between. I don't, to be clear, like I don't hate this show. Like I thought it was enjoyable. And
did you ever give The Following a chance?
I watched like the first 4 episodes. I actually think I enjoyed this more than The Following.
I was a pretty big fan of The Following when it was happening. I can't remember if I finished it, but that was a case where I was like, well, the show isn't going to be picked up, and there were some big cast changes in the story. But the first 2 seasons of The Following to me were very much like, I'm on board with this. Yeah. And this, you're right. It's trying to be like a little bit more pulpy, a little bit more campy, ridiculous at times. Yeah. And funny, more so than The Following, but it is living in that world of like sassy cops meets dark, twisted serial killers. So it is to me in the world between Lucifer and The Following, a more approachable view. Yeah,
and The Following, I believe it came up with the same year as Hannibal and was a much more direct comparison of The Following is a serious horror show, and that to me was like, okay, you're trying to do basically the same thing Hannibal's doing and you're doing it worse. Whereas it is at least again trying to do different, but it's not as different as I would want it to be.
Again, I'm just like, I'm not saying it'll change. I still think we're gonna have Case of the Week for the majority of the season, probably until the finale or mid-season finale or whatever. But something about, maybe it's the goodwill I have for the cast. Yeah. That's why I stuck around for The Following, too. I was like, oh, this cast wouldn't sign up for something crappy. Yeah. And we have Tom Hain, who's off of Walking Dead. I still saw some of his seasons. I dropped off of that show.
Bright. He's bright.
He's bright, yeah. He played Jesus in Walking Dead. That has like a huge audience. We have the actress who plays his mom, Bellamy Young. She's off of Scandal. She was I didn't watch a lot of Scandal, but when I watched her, she was great. Like she was one of the highlights of that show.
Scandalous.
Sort of, but kind of not. Like she was a powerhouse performance. And Michael Sheen, who plays the surgeon and the dad.
The surgeon.
Yeah, like he's just one of those guys that to me has been always, maybe the project isn't amazing, but he'll give you a consistent, like great performance. Yeah. And I'm loving his like freakiness.
I think he was good. I don't think he was amazing. Like, I liked him, and I wouldn't mind seeing him play off his son more. I think they have a good chemistry.
The chemistry is what the show is promising.
I think at the same time, I feel like there is another actor out there who could have like really brought another dimension to it that feels a little more fresh, or a little bit more comedic. But we saw like flickers of the comedy there that I'm like, I can see this developing into something even more fun. Like, I'll
say like, again, I'm not saying that there couldn't have been someone else for it. I just feel like some of his lines and dialogue were some of the clunkier ones to me. Yeah. Of like, you get a lot of shots of him smiling creepily down at his son, like, and there's just a whole lot of him just like playing that whole like smiling, I'm endearing, aren't I? And then it's actually like, and now I'm actually remember I'm a serial killer. Yeah. Like it was. But that to me is like the pilot trying to really shove it in your throat of like the dichotomy. Don't forget. Yeah. Blah, blah, blah.
I think I read some people saying that it almost felt like he wasn't aware of what show he was in. That he was one of the like ones that was like playing it maybe a little too straight, whereas everybody else was like having a little more like silliness with it. Even though he in some ways is the silliest character. Right. But he like, I don't know. So, I mean, I guess overall, do you think this is worth people's time? If they're a fan of Mindhunter, if they're a fan of,
Mindhunter, if you're just a fan of, I say, if you don't like procedurals, you're not going to like this. Yeah. You have to like the premise of case of the week. Yeah. We're solving it. There's the typical cops, people with the past. Family drama. Like, you have to be okay with bits and pieces of the overall story, but a lot of focus going into catching the bad guy. Yeah.
I do think that they seem to have built up a significant amount of not just Case of the Week, though, too. That it's not like... It's not going to be, CSI or Law and Order. No. It is going to be about his, like, the fact that we have his mom and his sister and his, like, surrogate father. And, like, they are his building, they're building his relationship with the ME. Like, they're building a world and a community and a family here. Yeah. And so I think that there will be things here to keep you sticking around, even if you're only ho-hum about Case of the Week. Yeah. I think it seems more in the House vein.
Yeah. I think it's going to be an easy watch. Doesn't take a whole lot of ever. You're not going to be sitting there and thinking about trying to solve anything yourself. Yeah. I think it'll just be like, I'm watching this and I'm liking the people. And that's about, and honestly, for me, that's all I really want out of it.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm not a procedural guy. I watched a few procedurals. But I would not be averse to watching the next episode of this. I could see it getting better. Yeah. I just wouldn't recommend it as like a great show or like a great pilot. I think it's a solid like a 7 out of 10, maybe a 6.5 out of 10.
I would give it a 6.5. Yeah. I'm not even as someone who's willing to give the rest of the season a chance.
Yeah. It's a fun premise.
It's a fun premise, and I think that they find some ways around like the promises of goofy stuff. Just like even something that at first I raised my eyebrow of like, do we really have a flashback right now? They didn't do good makeup on this guy. Yeah. And then they explain their way out of that. Yeah, it's a show that for every time I was a little bit too worried, they pulled me back in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. With the acting.
We won't say anything else about that.
Thank you so much for watching/listening to our show. Check out the other topics to the right of my beautiful face, or the left, wait, my face is here. The right is over there. To the right of my beautiful face, covering up Olga's face.
I thought you were going to call my face beautiful.
It's going to be covering her up or something. So basically, as the other topics from this week become available, they'll cover up her face. They're probably covering up her face with other things before that happens. And then scheduling and the audio podcast stuff is subject to the success of these videos as we experiment with the format. If you want us to build the audio podcast, let us know in the comments down below. We're not going to immediately jump on that, but if people seem interested, that's what we'll do. Thank you so much for watching. Again, I'm Dan.
I'm Olga.
And I hope you're doing okay.